The alarm clock blared at 5:30 a.m., yanking Emily Carter out of a fitful sleep. She smacked the snooze button with well-practiced annoyance, her hand moving automatically in the pre-dawn gloom of her studio apartment. The frigid Chicago air had snaked its way through the old windows overnight, and she could see her breath puffing out in the dim morning light. The radiator clanked and hissed, a symphony of noise that offered little in the way of actual warmth. Emily pushed herself upright, her body already staging a protest against the day that lay ahead. 26 years old, and she felt every bit of 40. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror echoed the same tired story it had been telling for the past 3 years. Dark circles haunted her hazel eyes. Her blonde hair was overdue for a decent cut she couldn't quite swing, and a thick fog of perpetual exhaustion clung to her, the unwelcome souvenir from working double shifts at a job that barely scraped above minimum wage. The shower water seemed to take an eternity to heat up. She stood there, shivering in the cramped stall, willing the ancient pipes to cooperate. Through the paper-thin walls, she could already hear her neighbor's television, blaring the morning news. Just another day in her cramped little corner of Chicago's struggling west side, where dreams came to slowly wither and die, and bills arrived with a cold, ruthless punctuality. By 6:15, Emily was squeezed into her work uniform. Black pants that had definitely seen better days, a starched white shirt she'd ironed the night before, and non-slip shoes that had lost all their cushioning months ago. She grabbed her coat, a thin barrier against the late November chill, but it was all she had, and ventured out into the bleak, gray Chicago dawn. The bus ride to Rosie's Diner ate up 40 minutes of her morning, including one transfer. Emily watched the city slowly rouse itself through the scratched bus windows. Delivery trucks lumbering along their routes. Early shift workers trudging towards the L train platforms. Homeless folks huddled in doorways, desperately seeking any sliver of shelter from the biting wind. The sky was a solid sheet of concrete, heavy with the threat of rain or, maybe, the season's first bone-chilling snow. Rosie's Diner was perched on a corner in a neighborhood that had never fully clawed its way back from the economic downturn. The neon sign sputtered and flickered, a couple of missing letters that nobody had bothered to replace. The place had been there for 30 years, and it showed every single day of it. Cracked vinyl booths, a counter permanently stained with countless rings of coffee, and a kitchen that barely squeaked by the health inspections. Emily pushed through the door at exactly 7 a.m. The breakfast rush was already building. Construction crews needing a jolt of coffee and a plate of eggs before heading out to the job sites. Office workers grabbing something quick to eat on the run. Regulars who simply had nowhere else to go. "You're late," Jerry Collins barked from behind the counter. Emily glanced up at the clock on the wall. 7 o'clock sharp. "I'm right on time, Jerry. On time is late. Early is on time." Jerry was a mountain of a man in his late 50s, perpetually sporting a scowl and a voice that boomed loud enough to carry across the entire diner. His apron was a Jackson Pollock of stains. His comb-over was fooling absolutely no one, and his management style could be generously described as somewhere between hostile and abusive. "Good morning to you too," Emily muttered, tying her apron tightly around her waist. "What was that?" "Nothing. Where do you want me?" "Tables." Sandra called in sick again. Jerry's tone suggested that he didn't believe Sandra was actually sick, and he was probably right. "And the coffee is running low. And table 6 has been waiting for 10 minutes. Get moving." Emily grabbed the coffee pot and began her rounds. Table 6 was occupied by Mr. Peterson, a regular who came in every single morning and never, ever left a tip. "Sorry for the wait, Mr. Peterson. What can I get you?" "Took you long enough. I'll have the usual. And this coffee better be fresh." It wasn't fresh. It had been sitting there since Jerry had brewed it at 6:30, slowly growing bitter and stale. But Emily poured it with a smile she definitely didn't feel and took his order back to the kitchen. The morning rush was a chaotic blur. Order after order, complaint after complaint, and Jerry's voice slicing through it all, criticizing every single thing she did. The coffee was too cold. The eggs were taking too long. She'd forgotten to refill the ketchup bottles. She hadn't smiled enough at table 3. "This isn't a charity, Carter," Jerry shouted during a brief lull in the madness. "Customers want service with a smile. You look like you're at a funeral." Emily bit her tongue hard. She desperately needed this job. The rent was due in a week. Her student loans were slowly drowning her. And the night classes she'd been taking at the community college, desperately trying to claw her way towards something better, had drained what little savings she had managed to accumulate. By 10 a.m., the breakfast rush had faded into the late-morning coffee crowd. Emily's feet were screaming in agony. Her lower back was a solid knot of pain, and she'd earned maybe $20 in tips. She was refilling the sugar dispensers when it happened. Table 8. A businessman in an impeccably expensive suit, furiously typing away on his laptop while his coffee slowly grew cold. Emily had already brought him 3 refills without him so much as glancing up. She approached the table with the coffee pot for a 4th refill, carefully reaching over his computer. The pot slipped in her hand. Not much, just a tiny little wobble. Barely a few drops of coffee splashed onto the table beside his laptop. Nothing touched his computer. Nothing touched him. But Jerry saw it all from across the diner. Carter in the back now. Emily's stomach plummeted. She set down the coffee pot, her hands trembling slightly, and walked slowly towards the kitchen. The businessman hadn't even noticed the near miss, still completely absorbed in whatever he was working on. But Jerry was red-faced and absolutely furious. "Do you have any idea how expensive that man's suit is?" Jerry hissed once they were safely in the back, though his voice was still loud enough for half the diner to hear. "You could have ruined his computer. We could have been sued." "It was barely a drop, Jerry. Nothing. I don't want to hear your excuses. You're careless. You're slow. And frankly, I'm tired of your attitude." "My attitude?" Emily felt something inside her finally crack. 3 years of bottled-up frustration finally bubbling to the surface. "I've been working here for 3 years, Jerry. I'm never late. I cover shifts when other people call in sick. I put up with your constant crap. You're replaceable, Carter. There are 100 girls who'd be grateful for this job." The words hung in the stale air between them. Emily stared at her boss. This small, mean man who had made her life a living hell for the past 3 years, and something finally shifted deep inside her. The fear of losing the job, the fear that had kept her silent through countless humiliations, suddenly seemed less important than her own damn dignity. "Do you know what, Jerry? Maybe one of those 100 girls should have this job." She untied her apron and dropped it onto the prep counter with a soft thud. Jerry blinked, clearly surprised by her sudden defiance. "What are you doing?" "I'm taking my break. I'll finish my shift because I'm professional, unlike some people. But after that, we're going to have a conversation about respect." She walked out before he could even respond, pushing through the back door and into the alley behind the diner. The cold November air hit her face like a slap, and she took a series of deep, shaky breaths. Her hands were trembling, shaking with a mixture of anger, fear, and the sheer adrenaline of finally standing up for herself. Emily pulled out her phone and leaned back against the cold brick wall. She had 4 hours left on her shift. For more hours of Jerry's passive-aggressive comments, his pointed looks, and the knowledge that he'd make her life even more miserable than he already did. The afternoon was even worse than she had imagined. Jerry assigned her to all the least desirable tasks: cleaning the grease trap, scrubbing the floor behind the coffee machines, organizing the walk-in freezer. He barely spoke to her, which somehow felt even worse than the yelling. The other staff members avoided her, sensing the rising tension and not wanting to be associated with someone who had dared to challenge the boss. By 3 p.m., when her shift mercifully ended, Emily was exhausted in a way that went far beyond mere physical tiredness. She gathered her things from her locker, ignored Jerry's pointed silence, and walked out into the bleak gray afternoon. The bus ride home seemed longer than usual. The sky had grown dark with storm clouds, and the first icy drops of rain began to fall as she walked the 3 blocks from the bus stop to her apartment building. By the time she trudged up the stairs to her 3rd-floor studio, she was soaked to the bone and shivering. Emily dropped her bag by the door, peeled off her wet clothes, and stood under the scalding hot shower until the water finally started to cool. She wrapped herself in her worn bathrobe and sat heavily on her bed, just staring at the peeling walls of her tiny apartment. This was her life. A cramped studio apartment with a kitchenette barely big enough to turn around in. A bathroom where the toilet ran constantly and a single window that looked out onto the depressing brick wall of another building. Her furniture was all secondhand. A futon that served as both couch and bed. A small, rickety table with a single chair, and a dresser she'd rescued from the curb and given a fresh coat of paint. Her college degree hung on the wall. A bachelor's in business administration that had promised opportunity and delivered only crippling debt. Emily opened her laptop, another relic from her college days, held together with a combination of hope and duct tape. She'd been applying for better jobs for 2 long years. Office positions, administrative assistant roles, anything that would get her out of the soul-crushing service industry. The rejection emails had become painfully routine. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. Your qualifications are impressive, but we'll keep your resume on file. She pulled up her email account and stared blankly at the screen. The cursor blinked mockingly in the composition window. She'd thought about quitting 100 times before, but tonight felt different. Tonight, she'd actually stood up to Jerry. Tonight, she'd seen with crystal clarity what her life had become and decided, with a fierce determination, that she simply couldn't accept it anymore. Emily began to type, her fingers flying across the keyboard as the words poured out of her. Jerry, I quit. Effective immediately. I've spent 3 years at Rosie's Diner, and in that time I've never been late, never stolen, never caused a problem. I've covered countless shifts when others called in sick. I've dealt with difficult customers with patience. I've worked overtime without complaint, and in return, I've been yelled at, humiliated, and treated like I'm disposable. You've criticized everything I've done, no matter how well I did it. You created an environment where fear is the primary motivator, where staff members are too scared to take bathroom breaks or even ask questions. Today, you humiliated me in front of customers over a drop of coffee that didn't even hit anything. That was the moment I realized that no job is worth sacrificing your self-respect. I deserve better than this. Everyone who works for you deserves better than this. Maybe someday you'll realize that treating people with basic human dignity isn't a weakness. It's the foundation of good leadership. I won't be returning to Rosie's Diner. Please mail my final paycheck to my address on file. Emily Carter. She read it over one last time, her heart pounding in her chest. 3 years of frustration condensed into a few short paragraphs. Felt so good. Felt absolutely right. Felt utterly terrifying. Emily pulled up her contacts and found Jerry's email address. Jerry, Collins Diner, com. She copied it into the to field, her finger hovering hesitantly over the send button. What would she do for money? How would she pay the rent? The questions swirled around in her mind, but they felt distant, almost insignificant, compared to the immediate, overwhelming need to reclaim some small piece of herself. She hit send. The email whooshed away into the vast digital void, and Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was done. Whatever happened next, she'd made a choice. She'd taken back control of something in her life. Emily closed her laptop and collapsed back onto her futon. Suddenly completely exhausted, she listened to the rain drumming relentlessly against her window, and the room slowly grew dark. She should get up, make some dinner, figure out her budget, start applying for new jobs with a renewed sense of urgency. Instead, she pulled a blanket tightly around herself and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would be soon enough to deal with the consequences. Tonight, she just wanted to savor the sweet, intoxicating freedom of having finally stood up for herself. She drifted off to sleep as the storm intensified outside. Rain lashed against the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance. Chicago's November weather was harsh and unforgiving. But inside her small, cramped apartment, Emily Carter slept more peacefully than she had in years. The next morning, Emily woke up to the sound of her alarm clock with a strange and unfamiliar feeling. It took her a few moments to identify it as a sense of profound relief. No work today, no Jerry, no soul-crushing diner. The freedom was intoxicating and absolutely terrifying in equal measure. She made coffee in her small French press, one of the few nice things she owned, a graduation gift from her mother. The morning light filtered weakly through her window, gray and subdued, but without the oppressive urgency of having to rush off to work. It felt almost peaceful. Emily opened her laptop, ready to begin the daunting job search in earnest. Her inbox loaded, displaying the usual assortment of spam, a few promotional emails, and, unexpectedly, a response to her resignation email, sent just hours ago. The sender was Jerry, Colino Enterprises. Com. Emily frowned. That definitely wasn't Jerry's email address. The domain was completely wrong. She opened the email, her confusion growing with each passing second. Miss Carter, your email was illuminating. I appreciate candor, especially when it comes with such conviction. It's rare to encounter someone willing to speak truth to power, regardless of the personal cost. While I'm clearly not the intended recipient of your message, I found myself impressed by your courage and your integrity. People like you are valuable, far more valuable than you apparently realize. I have a position available that might be of interest to you. The work is demanding, but you would be compensated fairly and treated with the respect you clearly haven't been receiving. If you're interested in discussing this opportunity further, please come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m. The address is listed below. Interesting mistakes sometimes lead to interesting opportunities. The Marino Enterprises, 875 North Michigan Avenue, Suite 4200, Chicago. Emily read the email 3 times, her coffee growing cold and forgotten in her hands. She'd accidentally sent her scathing resignation to the wrong person. A simple typo, Collins instead of Kino. But who exactly was V. Marino? And why would a complete stranger offer her a job based on an angry resignation email that wasn't even meant for him? She Googled Marino Enterprises Chicago. The search results were surprisingly sparse. A basic professional website listing import and export services, but lacking any specific details. A business registration showing that the company had been established approximately 15 years ago. A few brief mentions in Chicago business publications, always vague and lacking substance. No social media presence whatsoever. No employee reviews on any of the major job sites. She then searched for V.M. Marino Chicago, but the results were even less informative. No LinkedIn profile, no Facebook page, absolutely nothing that would give her any real sense of who this person was. The address provided was on the Magnificent Mile, one of Chicago's most exclusive and expensive districts. Whatever Marino Enterprises was, it clearly had serious money. Emily leaned back in her chair, staring intently at her laptop screen. This was all incredibly strange, possibly even too strange. A mysterious businessman offering her a job based on an email that wasn't even intended for him. It sounded like the opening scene of some cautionary tale her mother would tell. But then again, what exactly did she have to lose? She had just quit her job. Her rent was due in a mere 6 days. She had maybe $300 in her checking account and another $200 in savings. She desperately needed work, and she needed it soon. The address was public, a major office building in the middle of broad daylight. She could simply go, listen to what the offer was, and leave immediately if anything felt even slightly off. It was at least worth investigating. Emily looked around her tiny apartment, at the worn second-hand furniture and the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. She thought about Jerry's sneering face, about 3 long years of being treated as completely disposable, about the endless stream of rejection emails and the daunting student loan statements, and about a future that felt like it was steadily closing in on her rather than opening up with possibilities. Sometimes, she thought, you simply had to take a chance, even if it seemed completely crazy, especially if it seemed completely crazy. She clicked reply on the email. Mr. Marino, I will be there tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you for this opportunity. Emily Carter. She sent it before she could even second-guess herself, then immediately began to wonder what she had just gotten herself into. The rest of the day was spent in anxious preparation, desperately researching what little information she could find about Marino Enterprises, and carefully selecting her one and only professional outfit, a black pants suit she'd purchased for college interviews and barely worn since. That night, lying awake in the darkness of her apartment, Emily stared up at the ceiling and wondered if she was being incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. The rain had returned, tapping insistently against her window like a stern warning. Tomorrow she would find out exactly what kind of opportunity could possibly come from a mistaken email. Tomorrow, her life would change in ways she couldn't possibly begin to imagine. The city rumbled and hummed outside her window. 8 million individual stories unfolding simultaneously in the Chicago darkness, and Emily Carter, former waitress, was about to become part of a story far stranger than any she had ever dared to dream. Emily barely slept a wink. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind raced with a barrage of unanswered questions and wild scenarios. Who was V. Marino? What kind of company operated with such a deliberate veil of anonymity? Why would a complete stranger offer her a job based solely on an angry resignation email meant for someone else entirely? By 4 a.m., she gave up on any hope of sleep and brewed herself a strong pot of coffee. The apartment was cold, and she wrapped herself tightly in a blanket while sitting at her small, rickety table, watching the city slowly wake up through her window. Chicago before dawn had a unique and particular quality all its own. Quiet but expectant, the calm before millions of lives collided in the daily rush. By 7 a.m., Emily had showered and was standing in front of her closet, staring with dismay at the limited choices. The black pants suit was her only viable option for something even remotely formal. She paired it with a crisp white blouse she'd hand-washed the night before, and her only pair of real heels, purchased for job interviews that had ultimately gone nowhere. Looking at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the person staring back at her. For the past 3 years, she'd been wearing stained work uniforms and those awful non-slip shoes. This version of herself, professional, put together, felt almost like a costume. The L train to downtown was packed with morning commuters. Emily stood pressed tightly against other passengers, clutching the overhead pole for balance and trying desperately not to wrinkle her suit. She watched the city gradually transform through the grimy train windows as they moved steadily from her working-class neighborhood towards the gleaming towers of downtown Chicago. Michigan Avenue emerged like a completely different world. Designer stores lined the streets, their windows displaying clothes that cost more than Emily's monthly rent. Businesspeople in impeccably expensive suits walked with a sense of unwavering purpose. Briefcases clutched tightly in their hands, Bluetooth earpieces firmly in place, conducting important business deals. Sleek luxury cars navigated the heavy traffic. This was the Chicago of postcards and glossy tourism brochures, so vastly different from the Chicago she knew. Number 875 North Michigan Avenue was a breathtaking glass tower that seemed to pierce the bleak November sky. Emily stood on the sidewalk, craning her neck to see the top, suddenly feeling very small and insignificant. The building's entrance was all polished marble and gleaming brass, with a security desk staffed by 2 stern-faced guards in crisp uniforms. She checked the time on her phone. 9:45 a.m. 15 minutes early. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Early is on time. On time is late. She smiled slightly. Jerry had said the exact same thing, although her mother had always said it with love and encouragement rather than with contempt and condescension. Emily pushed through the revolving doors, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. The lobby was incredibly impressive, with soaring ceilings, modern art adorning the walls, and the hushed atmosphere of serious wealth. She approached the security desk, suddenly feeling acutely aware of how out of place she looked. "Good morning," she said, trying her best to sound confident and composed. "I have an appointment with Mr. Marino at Marino Enterprises, Suite 4200. The security guard, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, checked his computer. "Name, Emily Carter," he typed, then nodded. "You're on the list. 42nd floor. Elevators are to your right. You'll need this visitor badge." He handed her a badge clipped to a lanyard. Emily thanked him and walked towards the elevators, her heart pounding in her chest. The 42nd floor. She'd never been that high up in a building before. The elevator was empty, mirrored walls reflecting her nervous expression back at her. She pressed the button for 42 and watched the numbers slowly climb. Her stomach dropped slightly as the elevator rose smoothly and rapidly. Through the glass back of the elevator, she could see Chicago spreading out beneath her, the city transforming into a detailed map of itself. The doors opened onto a sleek reception area that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Lake Michigan and the breathtaking city skyline. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive materials, leather and dark wood and brushed steel. The art on the walls looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything was pristine, professional, and incredibly intimidating. A woman sat behind a curved reception desk, perfectly groomed with dark hair pulled back into an elegant bun. She looked up as Emily approached, her expression professionally pleasant. "Good morning. How may I help you? I'm Emily Carter. I have a 10 o'clock appointment with Mr. Marino." The receptionist checked her computer, then smiled politely. "Of course. Please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Emily sat down in one of the plush leather chairs, trying her best not to fidget nervously. The receptionist returned to her work, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The office was quiet except for the muted sounds of the city 42 floors below and the soft classical music playing from hidden speakers. She noticed small details as she waited. The receptionist answered the phone twice, her voice warm and professional, but revealing absolutely nothing. "Marino Enterprises. How may I direct your call?" A man in an expensive suit walked quickly through the reception area, nodding to the receptionist without breaking stride. Another man emerged from an interior hallway, also impeccably well-dressed, carrying a leather portfolio. He glanced at Emily with a brief flicker of curiosity before disappearing into a nearby elevator. Everyone here moved with a sense of unwavering purpose, spoke in low, controlled voices, and carried themselves with the quiet confidence of people accustomed to power and influence. Emily felt like an anthropologist observing a completely foreign culture. At exactly 10 a.m., a door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with sharp features and piercing eyes that seemed to catalog everything in an instant. His suit probably cost more than Emily's car had back when she'd owned a car. "Miss Carter?" His voice was professionally neutral. Emily stood up, smoothing her jacket. "Yes, I'm Emily Carter. I'm David. Mr. Marino will see you now. Please, follow me." She followed him through the door into a hallway lined with abstract art and more breathtaking floor-to-ceiling windows. Her heels sank luxuriously into the thick carpet, so plush it felt like walking on clouds. They passed several closed doors. No nameplates, no signs indicating what went on behind them. David stopped at a door at the very end of the hall and knocked once before opening it. "Miss Carter is here, sir. Send her in." The voice was deep, controlled, with an accent that spoke of Chicago roots tempered by education and time. David stepped aside, and Emily walked into the office. If the reception area had been impressive, this was simply overwhelming. The office occupied a corner of the building, with expansive windows on two walls offering breathtaking panoramic views of both the sprawling city and the vast, shimmering lake. The furniture was minimalist but undeniably expensive. A massive desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of dark wood, leather chairs, a comfortable sitting area with a plush sofa and a stylish coffee table, and bookshelves lining one wall, filled with beautiful leather-bound volumes. The art was original, not cheap prints. Emily could see the texture of the paint on the canvas. And behind the desk, standing as she entered, was Vincent Marino. He was definitely not what she had expected, although she realized she hadn't really known what to expect. Probably in his early 40s, tall and well-built with dark. His hair showed streaks of gray near his temples, a subtle sign of experience. He was dressed in a charcoal gray suit with faint pinstripes, impeccably tailored. But what really drew her attention was his face. He had strong, well-defined features and intelligent, dark eyes that seemed to penetrate beneath the surface. His expression was a mix of welcome and assessment, as if he were trying to gauge her character. "Miss Carter, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing toward one of the chairs facing his desk. "Please sit down." Emily sat, acutely aware of being scrutinized. Vincent settled into his own chair with smooth, controlled movements. He picked up a paper from his desk. She recognized it as a printed copy of her resignation email. "I've read this several times," he remarked, a slight smile playing on his lips. "It's remarkably honest. Refreshingly so." Emily wasn't sure how to respond. "It wasn't meant for you, obviously. Clearly. Though I'm curious. Do you always communicate with such directness?" "Only when I'm fed up with being treated badly," she replied, then wondered if she had been too candid for a job interview. Vincent's smile widened just a bit. "Good. I have no use for people who tell me what they think I want to hear. I'm surrounded by enough of those already." He set the paper down and leaned back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Carter. Beyond what I read in your spirited resignation." Emily took a breath. "There's not much to tell. I'm 26. I graduated from Roosevelt University 4 years ago with a degree in business administration. I've been working at Rosie's Diner for 3 years because the job market wasn't exactly kind to graduates with my GPA and lack of connections." She paused, the memory still stinging a bit. "I've been trying to find something better, but..." She shrugged. "You know how it is. Entry-level positions want 5 years of experience. And yet you stayed at a job where you were clearly unhappy for 3 years. Why? Because unhappy with a paycheck is better than happy and homeless," Emily stated bluntly. "I have student loans, rent, bills. Until yesterday, I couldn't afford the luxury of quitting." "What changed yesterday?" Emily met his gaze directly. "I realized that some things are more expensive than money, like your dignity, your self-respect. I couldn't afford to keep paying that price." Vincent nodded slowly, a hint of approval in his expression. "You mentioned in your email that you'd covered shifts, worked overtime, dealt with difficult situations without complaint. That speaks to reliability and work ethic. I'm good at my job, any job. I just haven't had the opportunity to prove it in a job that matters." "And what would matter to you, Miss Carter? In a job?" Emily considered the question carefully. "Respect, fair compensation, the opportunity to use my skills for something more than refilling coffee cups. The chance to grow, to learn, to become better at what I do." "Ambitious. Is that a problem?" "Not at all. Ambition without entitlement is valuable." Vincent stood and walked to the windows, looking out over the city. Emily remained seated, unsure if she should follow. "I'm going to be direct with you," Vincent said, his back still to her. "I need someone I can trust. Someone intelligent, discreet, and most importantly, someone who isn't already part of my world." He turned to face her. "My business requires absolute confidentiality. I deal with sensitive information, complex negotiations, people who value their privacy. Everyone in my existing circle has connections, relationships, loyalties that sometimes conflict with their work for me. You, Miss Carter, are a blank slate. You have no ties to my industry, no preconceptions, no hidden agendas." Emily's weariness increased. "What exactly is your industry, Mr. Marino?" "Import and export primarily, some real estate holdings, various investments." His tone was smooth, practiced, but the specifics of the business mattered less than the requirements of the position, which is personal assistant. "You'd manage my schedule, handle correspondence, conduct research, coordinate meetings, manage certain business matters that require someone I can trust implicitly." It sounded legitimate, maybe too legitimate. Emily's instincts were firing warning signals. "Why me? You don't know me. That email could have been a fluke. I could be terrible at this kind of work." Vincent walked back to his desk, pulled out a folder, and slid it across to her. "That's your personnel file from Rosie's Diner. I had someone retrieve it this morning." Emily opened it, stunned. Her employment application, performance reviews, shift logs, everything was there. "How did you?" "I have resources. Your file shows perfect attendance, only 2 sick days in 3 years. Consistently positive customer feedback before your boss started writing his own reviews of you, which were considerably less generous. You're punctual, reliable, and capable. The email simply confirmed what your record suggested. You have integrity. Emily felt a chill. The speed and thoroughness of this background check spoke to serious resources. This wasn't a normal business. Mr. Marino, I appreciate the offer, but I need to understand what I'm getting into. You've been vague about the actual work. You somehow obtained my employment records overnight, and everything about this situation feels unusual. You're right to be cautious. That's actually another point in your favor. Vincent sat down again, his expression becoming more serious. I'll be honest with you to a point. My business operates in gray areas. Nothing I do is strictly wrong, but not everything is strictly standard either. I require discretion because my competitors would use any information against me. I require loyalty because betrayal in my industry has serious consequences. What kind of consequences? The end of careers, reputations destroyed, business relationships severed. He paused. I won't lie to you and say there's no risk. Working for me means entering a world where information is currency and trust is everything. But I also won't put you in danger. You'd be handling legitimate business matters, scheduling correspondence research. Nothing that would compromise you legally or morally. Emily studied his face, trying to read between the words. He was being honest about being dishonest, acknowledging the shadows without defining them. It should have made her run. Instead, she found herself intrigued. What's the compensation? $75,000 annually to start. Health insurance retirement contribution after 6 months. If you're performing well, we renegotiate. Emily's breath caught. She'd been making $22,000 at the diner, barely scraping by. This would change everything. She could pay off her loans, save money, maybe even take classes again. That's generous. Almost too generous. I pay for quality and loyalty. What you'd be learning, the access you'd have to my business operations and contacts, that's valuable. I'm paying you enough that leaving becomes difficult, which ensures you'll think twice before sharing what you know. It was manipulation, but he was being transparent about it. Emily appreciated the honesty, even as she recognized the trap being set. And if I want to leave after 6 months, you can leave whenever you want. I'd ask for 2 weeks' notice, and I'd expect you to honor the confidentiality agreement you'd sign. Beyond that, you're free to go. I don't believe in forcing people to stay. I believe in making them want to stay. Emily sat back, her mind racing. This was crazy. Everything about this situation screamed warning. The mysterious business, the vague descriptions, the almost absurd salary for what seemed like basic administrative work. But against that, she weighed her current situation. Broke, jobless, facing an uncertain future in a city that had no sympathy for people without resources. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Vincent nodded. Of course. I'd be concerned if you didn't. Take 24 hours. If you decide you're interested, call the number on my card. He pulled a business card from his desk and slid it across to her. Simple, elegant, just a name and phone number. No title, no company name. Emily took the card, feeling the weight of expensive cardstock. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really offer me this job? The real reason, not the official answer. Vincent smiled. A genuine smile this time, not the professional mask. Because your email reminded me that there are still people who choose principle over convenience. Because you walked away from a sure thing for an uncertain thing simply because it was the right thing to do. In my experience, people who do that once will do it again. And I need people around me who will do the right thing even when it costs them. It was a good answer, maybe too good. Emily stood, and Vincent rose with her. Thank you for your time, Mr. Marino. Vincent, if you take this job, we'll be working closely together. Formality creates distance I don't need. Then thank you, Vincent. He walked her to the door, opened it. David will see you out. I hope to hear from you tomorrow, Emily. The use of her first name felt deliberate, personal. Emily nodded and followed David back through the quiet hallways, into the elevator, down to the lobby, and out into the Chicago morning. The cold air hit her face like a splash of water. She walked without direction, processing what had just happened. The city moved around her. Cars honking, people rushing past. the endless motion of urban life. She found herself at Millennium Park, sitting on a bench near the Bean sculpture, watching tourists take selfies and children play. Her phone buzzed. A text from her landlord. Rent due in 5 days. Need to talk about late fees. Emily stared at the message, then at the business card in her hand. Vincent Marino's card felt like a key. To what? She wasn't sure. A better life. A dangerous mistake? Both. Another text, this time from her mother. How are you, honey? Haven't heard from you in a week. Call me when you can. She couldn't tell her mother about this. Her mother, who'd worked 2 jobs to help pay for college, who'd taught her the value of honest work and simple living. What would she say about her daughter considering working for a man who admitted to operating in gray areas? But then what would she say about her daughter working for a man who'd humiliated her daily for 3 years? There were different kinds of compromise, different ways to lose yourself. Emily sat on that bench for over an hour, watching the city move around her, weighing her options. Finally, she stood and started walking back toward the L train station. She needed to go home, think clearly, make a list of pros and cons like she'd learned in business school. But deep down, beneath the rational analysis and careful consideration, she already knew what her answer would be. Sometimes the scariest choice is the only one that makes sense. Sometimes you have to trust that the person who sees your potential is right, even when you can't quite see it yourself. Chicago's wind cut through her coat as she waited for the train. But Emily barely felt it. Her mind was already in that corner office, sitting across from Vincent Marino, learning his world, becoming something more than she'd been. Tomorrow she'd make the call. Tonight, she'd allow herself to imagine a future that felt possible again. The train arrived, and Emily stepped aboard, carrying Vincent's business card and the weight of a decision that would change everything. Behind her, the city's towers gleamed in the weak November sunlight, monuments to ambition and risk, and the belief that sometimes you have to leap before you know where you'll land. Emily spent the night in her small apartment, staring at Vincent Marino's business card, as if it might reveal secrets written in invisible ink. The simple white cardstock with embossed letters, just a name and number, felt heavier than it should. She made lists, pros and cons, risks and rewards, logical arguments for and against. The pro list was undeniably compelling. Real money, a genuine career opportunity, a chance to escape the soul-crushing cycle of low-wage jobs. The con list was unsettling. A mysterious employer shrouded in secrecy, a vague job description that raised more questions than answers, and an admission that his business operated in morally ambiguous gray areas. At 2 a.m. Unable to sleep, Emily opened her laptop and tried again to research Vincent Marino. She found a few more mentions this time, buried in the archives of Chicago business publications. His name appeared in connection with a large-scale commercial real estate development on the city's south side, a project that had seemingly revitalized a struggling neighborhood. Another brief mention in a charitable donation list for a children's hospital. There was nothing overtly scandalous, but nothing truly revealing either. He seemed to exist in the public record as a shadow, present but ultimately undefined. By morning, Emily had finally made her decision. Maybe it was born out of desperation, or maybe it was fueled by a gut feeling that defied logic, but she couldn't shake the conviction that Vincent had been genuine in his offer. He had been honest about being partially dishonest, which, ironically, was more than most employers were willing to offer. At 9 a.m. sharp, she dialed the number on the card. He answered on the second ring. "This is Vincent. It's Emily Carter. I'd like to accept your offer." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "I'm pleased to hear that. Can you start today?" "Today?" Emily blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Yes, I suppose I can." "Good. Come to the office at 11 a.m. David will have the necessary paperwork ready for you to sign, and we'll begin your orientation." His voice softened slightly as he added, "I'll be there, Emily. You're making the right choice. I'll make sure of it." The line went dead. Emily stood in her small, sparsely furnished apartment, phone still clutched in her hand, feeling as if she had just jumped off a cliff. The only question now was whether she would learn to fly on the way down. By 10:45 a.m., Emily was back in the opulent marble lobby of 875 North Michigan Avenue. This time, the security guard recognized her and offered a warm smile as he prepared her visitor's badge. "Welcome back, Ms. Carter. 42nd floor." The elevator ride felt different today. Less like ascending to a nerve-wracking interview and more like rising toward her future, however uncertain that future might be. When the doors opened on the 42nd floor, David was waiting for her in the reception area. "Miss Carter, right on time. Please follow me." He led her past the familiar reception desk and down the hallway she had walked the day before. This time, however, they stopped at a door closer to Vincent's office. David opened it to reveal a smaller, but still incredibly impressive office space. It boasted floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling cityscape, a pristine desk with a brand-new computer, several sleek filing cabinets, and a comfortable-looking sitting area. "This is your office," David stated matter-of-factly. "The computer is set up with your login credentials. You'll find your username and temporary password in this envelope. You'll want to change the password after your first login. Mr. Marino is particular about security protocols." Emily stepped inside, feeling a wave of awe wash over her. Her own office with windows and a door that closed securely. It might have been modest by the extravagant standards of this place, but compared to the cramped, chaotic break room at the diner, it felt like a palace. "I'll give you a few minutes to settle in," David continued. "Then we'll go over the paperwork and your initial responsibilities. Coffee, please. Black." David nodded and disappeared. Emily tentatively set her bag on the desk. Her old canvas backpack, worn from years of hauling textbooks and work supplies, looked hopelessly shabby against the polished wood. She gingerly sat down in the plush, ergonomic chair, sinking into its comfortable embrace. The computer monitor was large, sleek, and new. The desk held a stylish phone, a luxurious leather desk pad, and a pen holder filled with expensive-looking pens. Everything was perfectly arranged, as if they had known with absolute certainty that she would say yes. The view from her window showcased Lake Michigan stretching out to the horizon, its surface a somber steel gray under the dull November sky. Sailboats were covered and securely docked for the winter. The water looked cold and unforgiving, but undeniably beautiful in its stark, harsh way. David returned a few moments later, carrying a steaming mug of coffee in a real ceramic mug, not the flimsy styrofoam cups she was accustomed to. "Here's your employment contract, non-disclosure agreement, and benefits information. Take your time reading everything thoroughly. Mr. Marino insists that people understand exactly what they're signing." Emily spent the next hour poring over the documents, reading each clause and condition with meticulous care. The employment contract itself was surprisingly straightforward. A $75,000 annual salary, 2 weeks of paid vacation time, comprehensive health insurance with the company covering 80% of the premiums, and a 401k retirement plan with matching contributions up to 5%. Standard corporate benefits, surprisingly normal. The non-disclosure agreement, however, was another matter entirely. It was comprehensive, complex, and frankly intimidating. She agreed not to discuss any aspect of Marino Enterprises' business operations, client lists, financial information, or internal communications with anyone outside the organization, ever. The penalties for violation were severe, ranging from substantial financial damages and protracted legal action to potential criminal prosecution where applicable. Despite a slight tremor in her hand, Emily signed both documents. David collected the paperwork, then pulled a brand-new smartphone from his jacket pocket. Company phone. It's encrypted and monitored for security purposes. Use this for all business communications. Your personal phone stays personal. Mr. Marino respects boundaries. Monitored by whom? IT security. They're primarily looking for external threats, not policing your conversations, but you should assume that anything you say on this phone could potentially be reviewed. Just good practice. Emily took the phone. New, sleek, and expensive, it was probably worth more than 3 months of her old salary at the diner. "Now," David continued, sitting down across from her, "let me explain how things work around here. Mr. Marino values discretion above almost everything else. If someone asks where you work, you say import, export, and immediately change the subject. You absolutely do not bring friends or family to this office, and you never, ever discuss specific business matters outside these walls. Understood? Understood. Your primary responsibility will be managing Mr. Marino's schedule and correspondence. He meets with a variety of business associates, investors, and property owners. Some of these meetings are straightforward business, but others are more delicate. You'll learn to distinguish between them over time, and you'll know which ones require extra discretion. What does extra discretion mean? David's expression was carefully neutral. It means some meetings don't get entered into the digital calendar. Some visitors are shown to private conference rooms rather than Mr. Marino's personal office. And some conversations, if you happen to overhear them, are immediately forgotten. Emily nodded slowly, understanding the subtext. Whatever Vincent's business truly involved, there were layers to it. Legitimate operations on the surface, and something else entirely lurking beneath. You'll also conduct research for Mr. Marino, David continued, smoothly transitioning to a less sensitive topic. Market analysis, background checks on potential business partners, property valuations. He'll give you specific instructions, and your job is to be thorough, accurate, and fast. I can do that. I believe you can. One more thing. There are a few people in Mr. Marino's inner circle that you need to know. Marco Russo is his head of security and oldest friend. If Marco tells you something, treat it as if Mr. Marino said it himself. Sophia Chun is our lead attorney. She handles contracts, negotiations, and any legal complications that may arise. And I coordinate operations. Think of me as a bridge between Mr. Marino and the various moving parts of his business. Emily absorbed the information, noting that David had carefully avoided giving anyone formal titles beyond their functional roles. Any questions? David asked. Lots, but I assume they'll be answered as I learn the job. Smart. Mr. Marino is ready to see you now. Vincent's office felt less intimidating the second time around. He was on the phone when Emily entered, gesturing for her to take a seat. She caught snippets of the conversation, something about shipping schedules and customs clearances, all seemingly legitimate business discussions. He ended the call and smiled at her. Emily, welcome to your first day. How are you feeling? Honestly, nervous and excited in equal measure. Good. The day you stop being nervous is the day you stop being careful. He stood and walked to a small bar cart near the window. Water? Something else? Water is fine. He poured 2 glasses from a crystal pitcher, added ice, and brought one to her. The gesture felt surprisingly personal coming from a boss. I'm going to be direct about how I work, Vincent said, settling into the chair beside her rather than behind his imposing desk. I don't micromanage. I hire competent people and trust them to do their jobs, but I expect results and I expect honesty. If you make a mistake, tell me immediately. I can fix mistakes. I can't fix cover-ups. Understood? Understood. You're going to see and hear things that might make you uncomfortable. Business conversations that seem aggressive, people who are clearly afraid of me, situations that don't make complete sense from your perspective. He paused, his dark eyes serious. Your job isn't to judge or understand everything. Your job is to be reliable, discreet, and loyal. Can you do that? Emily considered her answer carefully. I can be reliable and discreet. Loyalty has to be earned. Vincent smiled. Fair enough. Then let me start earning it. He stood and gestured for her to follow him to his desk. He pulled up a document on his computer screen, a detailed breakdown of his business holdings. This is what Marino Enterprises actually does. Emily scanned the document. Import and export were listed, but so were real estate holdings across Chicago's south and west sides, investments in small businesses, ownership stakes in several restaurants and retail stores, a logistics company, and a construction firm. It's more diverse than I expected, Emily commented. I don't believe in keeping all my eggs in one basket. Some of these businesses are highly profitable. Others barely break even, but serve other purposes. Providing jobs in neighborhoods that need them, establishing a presence in communities, building relationships with people who might be useful allies. That almost sounds altruistic. Don't mistake strategy for charity. Everything I do serves a purpose, even if that purpose isn't immediately obvious. Vincent closed the document. Your first assignment is straightforward. I'm considering purchasing a building in Pilsen, a neighborhood on the Lower West Side. I need you to research the property's history, current market value, neighborhood development trends, and any potential complications with the acquisition. He handed her a file with the property address and basic information. I want a comprehensive report by the end of the day tomorrow. Use whatever resources you need. If you need access to databases or information services, David will set that up. Emily took the file, feeling the weight of real responsibility. I'll have it ready. I know you will. Vincent returned to his desk. One more thing. This Friday, I'm hosting a dinner meeting with potential business partners. I'll need you there to take notes and observe. It'll be your first real look at how I conduct business. Dress professionally. David will give you the details on the time and location. I'll be there. As Emily stood to leave, Vincent spoke again. Emily, you made a leap of faith accepting this position. I won't let you regret it. She nodded and left his office, her heart racing. Back in her own office, she opened the file on the Pilsen property and got to work. The next 2 days passed in a blur of intense learning. Emily researched the Pilsen property with a fervor, pulling public records, analyzing comparable sales, studying neighborhood development patterns, and even driving out to see the building in person. It was a 3-story brick structure, currently vacant, located in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. Her report was detailed, professional, and highlighted both the potential opportunities and the inherent risks of the acquisition. Vincent read it in silence while she stood in his office, trying not to fidget. Finally, he looked up. This is excellent work. Thorough, well-organized, and insightful. You caught several potential issues that I would have had to discover through my own research. Well done, Emily. Emily felt a rush of pride. Thank you. The dinner meeting is tomorrow night at 7 p.m. David has the details. It's at a private club downtown, Ginelli's. Have you heard of it? Emily shook her head. Exclusive membership. No public reservations. It's where Chicago's power brokers go when they want privacy. You'll meet people there who are influential in ways that don't show up on any Forbes lists. He paused. You'll also meet Marco tomorrow. He'll be joining us. Your head of security? My oldest friend, actually. We grew up together on the South Side. He can seem intense at times, but he's loyal, and his judgment is exceptionally sound. Friday evening arrived all too quickly. Emily had agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a simple. She wore a black dress she'd had since college and her only pair of decent heels. She took a cab to the address David had provided, an expense she wouldn't usually permit herself, but showing up disheveled from the L seemed inappropriate. Ginelli's was discreet, just an elegant door with a small brass nameplate on a quiet street in the Loop. A doorman in a tuxedo greeted her by name. Apparently, she was expected and escorted through a dimly lit hallway into a private dining room. Vincent was already there, talking quietly with 2 other men. He looked different outside the office, still impeccably dressed, but more relaxed, more in his element. When he saw Emily, he smiled and motioned her over. Gentlemen, this is Emily Carter, my new assistant. Emily, this is Robert Morrison and James Chun. Both men were probably in their 50s, expensively dressed with the easy confidence of people used to power. They shook her hand, their assessments quick and calculating. Vincent tells us you're already proving invaluable, Morrison said smoothly. High praise from him. Before Emily could respond, the door opened and a man entered who commanded immediate attention. Tall, broad-shouldered, with short, dark hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything instantly. He moved with precise control, and Emily noticed the slight bulge of something, probably a weapon, under his tailored jacket. Marco, Vincent said warmly, standing to embrace the man. You remember Morrison and Chan? Marco nodded to them, then his gaze landed on Emily. You must be the waitress. It wasn't said unkindly, but it was clearly a test. Emily met his eyes steadily. Former waitress, current assistant to Mr. Marino. A slight smile touched Marco's lips. Good. I was worried you might be too easily intimidated. They sat for dinner, and Emily observed carefully. The conversation flowed between legitimate business topics, real estate development, city politics, investment opportunities, and more carefully worded discussions that she suspected meant something different than they appeared. Morrison mentioned inventory challenges that needed creative logistics solutions. Vincent responded with comments about alternative distribution channels and trusted partners in customs facilitation. To anyone listening casually, it sounded like standard import-export talk, but the way they carefully phrased things, the meaningful glances suggested layers beneath the surface. Emily took notes on her tablet, recording only the surface-level business discussion, understanding instinctively which parts were meant to be documented and which were meant to evaporate into thin air. During a lull in the conversation, Chun turned to her. Miss Carter, Vincent mentioned you have a business degree. What made you choose to work for Marino Enterprises? It was another test. Emily chose her words carefully. I was looking for an opportunity to work with someone who valued competence and discretion. Mr. Marino offered both, along with the chance to learn aspects of business I wouldn't encounter in conventional corporate environments. Diplomatic, Chen observed with a slight smile. Vincent, you chose well. The dinner lasted 3 hours. By the end, a deal had been struck, though Emily wasn't entirely sure what the deal entailed. Papers were signed, hands were shaken, and Morrison and Chun departed, looking satisfied. Only Vincent, Marco, and Emily remained in the private dining room. Well, Vincent asked Marco, your assessment? Marco studied Emily for a long moment. She's smart, observant, didn't ask stupid questions or panic when the conversation got interesting. She might work out. High praise from Marco, Vincent told Emily with a slight smile. He usually hates everyone I hire. I don't hate them. I just recognize that most people are liabilities waiting to happen. Marco stood, buttoning his jacket. But Emily here seems to understand what discretion actually means. That's rare. After Marco left, Vincent walked Emily to the entrance. The November night was cold, and snow was starting to fall. The season's first real snowfall. You did very well tonight, Vincent said. Morrison and Chun are important business partners, and they're notoriously difficult to impress. But they liked you. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be doing beyond taking notes. You were being evaluated. They wanted to see if you could be trusted, if you understood the unspoken rules of our world. You passed. He gestured to a waiting car. David will drive you home. Same car will pick you up Monday morning. You shouldn't be taking public transportation at this hour. Emily wanted to protest that she'd been taking late-night trains for years, but she recognized the gesture for what it was. Not condescension, but protection. She was part of Vincent's organization now, which meant she was under his protection. The drive home felt surreal. The heated leather seats, the smooth ride, watching Chicago pass by through tinted windows. Emily lived in a different world now, and she was still figuring out the rules. The weekend passed in strange suspension. Emily's old life and new life felt like they existed in parallel dimensions that hadn't quite merged. She paid her rent, finally, without anxiety. She bought groceries without calculating every dollar. She even splurged on a new winter coat, something warm and professional, something that fit her new role. Monday morning, David picked her up at 7:30. Emily was getting used to the rhythm of her new life. Early starts, long days, work that challenged her mind rather than just exhausting her body. At the office, Vincent called her in immediately. I have a new project for you, a more complex one. He handed her another file, thicker this time. I'm considering a major investment in a restaurant group. 5 establishments across the Chicago area. But the current owner has financial troubles I need to understand before I commit. I need you to analyze their books, identify the problems, and recommend whether I should proceed with the acquisition, and under what terms. Emily opened the file, seeing financial statements, tax returns, operational reports. This was real business analysis, the kind of work she'd studied in college but never had the chance to apply. "I'll need about a week to do this properly," she said. "You have 3 days. This deal has competitors and I need to move fast. If I'm moving at all. Then I'll have it done in 3 days." For the next 72 hours, Emily barely slept. She analyzed cash flows, identified operational inefficiencies, discovered patterns of revenue decline, found evidence of poor management decisions, and possibly some creative accounting. She built financial models, projected future performance under different scenarios, calculated fair acquisition prices. Her report was 20 pages of detailed analysis with appendices of supporting data. She delivered it to Vincent at midnight on the 3rd day, finding him still in his office, papers spread across his desk. He read it in silence while Emily stood there, exhausted and nervous. Finally, he looked up. "This is exceptional work. You found problems even my accountants missed. Your analysis of the operational issues is spot on, and your recommended acquisition strategy is exactly what I was thinking, but with better supporting arguments." He paused. "You're wasted as just an assistant. Emily, this is analyst-level work, possibly consultant level." "Does that mean I get a raise?" Emily asked, too tired to filter the question. Vincent laughed, a genuine, warm sound she'd rarely heard from him. "Yes, we'll discuss your new compensation package tomorrow. For now, go home. David's waiting to drive you. And Emily, thank you. This is exactly the kind of work I need. And you delivered it under pressure. That matters." In the car, Emily leaned against the window, watching the city lights blur past. She was exhausted, challenged, pushed beyond what she'd thought she could do, and she'd succeeded. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Haven't heard from you lately. Everything okay?" Emily smiled and typed back, "Everything's good, Mom. Better than good. I'll call you this weekend." She'd found something she hadn't realized she'd been searching for. Not just a job, but a purpose. A place where her abilities mattered, where hard work was recognized, where she could be more than she'd been. The risks were real. The moral complexities were undeniable. But for the first time in years, Emily Carter felt like she was living rather than just surviving, and whatever came next, she was ready to face it. The car pulled up to her apartment building. The neighborhood looked different now, not home anymore, just the place where she slept before returning to the life that actually mattered. Emily climbed the stairs to her 3rd-floor studio, already thinking about tomorrow's challenges, already looking forward to proving herself again. Behind her, the city continued its endless motion. Millions of stories, millions of choices, millions of people finding their way, and Emily was finally truly finding hers. Winter settled over Chicago with brutal efficiency. By mid-December, the city was locked in a grip of cold that made the November chill seem gentle by comparison. Lake Michigan froze along the shoreline, and the wind that whipped between downtown towers felt like it could cut through steel. Emily had been working for Vincent Marino for 6 weeks, and her life had transformed so completely that her time at the diner felt like it belonged to someone else. The exhaustion was different now, mental rather than physical, challenging rather than soul-crushing. She worked 12-hour days regularly, sometimes longer, but every evening brought the satisfaction of having accomplished something meaningful. Her bank account reflected the change, too. After paying off 2 months of back rent and the most pressing credit card debt, she'd started saving for the first time since college. The weight of constant financial anxiety had lifted, replaced by a different kind of tension. The awareness that her comfortable new life rested on foundations she didn't fully understand. Vincent had been true to his word about the raise. Her salary was now $90,000, with a promise of bonuses tied to successful project completions. The restaurant acquisition she'd analyzed had gone through, and Vincent had given her credit in front of the entire deal team. Marco had nodded at her with what might have been approval. Sophia Chin, the attorney, had actually smiled. But as Emily learned more about Marino Enterprises, the careful boundaries between legitimate business and something else grew increasingly blurred. It was a Tuesday morning, bitterly cold, when the first crack appeared in Emily's insulated world. She arrived at the office to find the atmosphere changed. Tension in the air, voices lowered. David's expression carefully neutral as he greeted her. "Mr. Marino wants to see you immediately," he said quietly. Emily hung up her new wool coat, a Christmas gift from her mother, who'd been thrilled to hear her daughter was doing well, and went straight to Vincent's office. He was standing at the window, looking out at the frozen city below. Marco was there too, which was unusual for a morning meeting. Both men turned as she entered, and Emily immediately sensed something was wrong. "Close the door," Vincent said. His voice was controlled, but she heard the edge beneath it. Emily closed the door and sat when Vincent gestured to a chair. Marco remained standing, his posture alert in a way that made her nervous. "We have a situation," Vincent began, moving to sit behind his desk. "One that might affect you directly, which is why I'm telling you about it now." Emily's pulse quickened. "What kind of situation?" "There's another organization in Chicago. I won't name them. It's better you don't know. That's been expanding into territories and business sectors where our interests overlap. We've maintained a professional détente for years, but recently they've become more aggressive, making moves that challenge our operations, approaching our business partners, testing boundaries." Marco spoke, his voice hard. "Yesterday, one of our shipments was intercepted. Not by law enforcement, by this other organization. They're sending a message." "What does this have to do with me?" Emily asked, though she was beginning to understand. Vincent's expression was serious. "You've been seen with me multiple times now at Janelli's at various meetings entering this building. To outside observers, you're clearly important to my operations, which makes you potentially valuable to people who want to pressure me." The words hung in the air. Emily felt cold despite the office's warmth. "You're saying I might be in danger?" "I'm saying we're taking precautions. Marco has assigned someone to maintain awareness of your movements. Not invasively, but enough to ensure you're safe. I'm also arranging for you to move to a more secure building." "Move, Vincent? I can't just—" "You can and you will." His tone was firm but not unkind. "The apartment will be in the Gold Coast neighborhood, fully furnished, significantly better than your current place. I'll cover the rent as part of your compensation package. It's not optional, Emily. I brought you into this world, which means I'm responsible for your safety." Emily stood, pacing to the window, trying to process this. 6 weeks ago, I was worried about making rent. Now I need security because rival business organizations might target me. "Yes," Vincent said simply. "That's the reality of working in my world. I told you there were risks. This is one of them." Marco moved closer, his expression serious but not hostile. "Emily, listen to me. These people won't harm you. You're more valuable as leverage than as a victim. But they might follow you, approach you, try to recruit you to provide information about Vincent's operations. We need you somewhere secure, and we need you aware of your surroundings at all times." "Who exactly are these people?" Emily demanded, turning to face both men. Vincent and Marco exchanged a glance. Finally, Vincent spoke. "Competitors, people who operate in similar spaces, who want what I have: influence, territory, business, relationships. The specifics don't matter. What matters is that you understand the landscape has changed, and you need to be careful." Emily sat down slowly, her mind racing. "I need to call my mother. She's planning to visit for Christmas." "That's fine," Vincent said. "But she stays in a hotel, not at your place. And Marco's people will maintain awareness when she's in the city. We don't take chances with family." The casual way he said family struck Emily. In 6 weeks, she'd become part of something larger than just an employment relationship. She was inside Vincent's circle, under his protection, subject to the same risks as everyone else in his organization. "I need some air," Emily said quietly. Vincent nodded. "Take the morning. David will give you details about the new apartment. You can move this weekend. We'll handle everything." Emily found herself in Millennium Park, sitting on the same bench where she'd sat 6 weeks earlier, trying to decide whether to accept Vincent's offer. The park was nearly empty in the December cold. Just a few hardy tourists taking photos of the ice-covered bean sculpture. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Tony. I'm Mr. Marino's driver and part of your security detail. Black SUV parked on Michigan Avenue if you need anything." So it had already started. She was being watched over, protected, monitored. The thought was simultaneously comforting and claustrophobic. Emily called her mother. "Sweetheart, I was just thinking about you. How's the new job?" "It's good, Mom. Really good. But I need to talk to you about Christmas. Is something wrong?" Emily chose her words carefully. "No, nothing's wrong. But work has gotten more demanding, and I'm moving to a new apartment this weekend. Would you be okay staying at a hotel when you visit? I'll pay for it. My company has arrangements with some nice places downtown." "Emily, are you sure everything's all right? You sound stressed." "I'm fine, Mom. Honestly, the job is it's a bigger deal than I expected. My boss takes security seriously, and there are protocols I need to follow, but I'm safe. I'm making good money, and I'm finally using my degree." Her mother was silent for a moment. "Okay. But Emily, if anything feels wrong, if you're uncomfortable or unsafe, you tell me. Promise?" "I promise. I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart." Emily ended the call and sat there, watching Chicago move around her. The city that had felt so hostile when she was struggling now felt different. Not friendlier exactly, but more comprehensible. She understood now that there were layers to everything. Visible worlds and invisible ones, official narratives and actual operations. She returned to the office after lunch to find David waiting with a folder detailing the new apartment. "It's ready for you to view this evening if you'd like." The apartment was on the 30th floor of a luxury building with a doorman, security cameras, and controlled access. When Emily stepped inside, she understood why Vincent had insisted. The place was beautiful. Hardwood floors, modern kitchen, floor-to-ceiling windows with lake views, a bedroom separate from the living space. It was 3 times the size of her current studio and probably cost 5 times as much. "This is too much," Emily said quietly. David, who'd accompanied her for the viewing, shook his head. "It's what Mr. Marino considers appropriate for someone in your position. And more importantly, it's secure. Limited access points, 24-hour doorman, cameras in all common areas. You'll be safe here." Emily walked to the windows, looking out at the city lights reflecting off the frozen lake. Her old life kept receding, replaced by this new existence of luxury and hidden dangers, opportunity and complication. "I'll take it," she said. The move happened that Saturday. Emily had expected to do it herself, but Vincent sent a team of movers who packed her entire studio in 2 hours and had everything set up in the new apartment by afternoon. They even arranged her books and clothes, hung her art on the walls, made it feel like home. Marco appeared as the movers were finishing, doing a walkthrough of the apartment with professional thoroughness. He checked the windows, the locks, the sight lines from various positions. "Good building," he said finally. "Keep your curtains closed at night, so people can't track your patterns. Vary your route to work. Pay attention to anyone who appears in your vicinity multiple times. Basic awareness." "This feels paranoid," Emily said. "It's not paranoia if people are actually watching." Marco's expression softened slightly. "Look, I know this is a lot to process, but Vincent doesn't bring people into his inner circle lightly. The fact that he's taking these precautions means he values you. Take that seriously." After Marco left, Emily stood in her new apartment, surrounded by her modest possessions that looked even more modest in this space. She thought about calling her old roommate from college, but what would she say? "I work for a mysterious businessman who operates in gray areas, and now I need security because rival organizations might target me." Her mother arrived 2 days later, staying at the Palmer House Hilton, which Emily paid for without flinching, still amazed by her financial stability. They had dinner at a nice restaurant, and her mother was full of questions about the new job, the apartment, the sudden upward mobility. "I'm so proud of you, honey," her mother said over dessert. "After those years struggling at the diner, you deserve the success. Your boss must think very highly of you." "He does," Emily said carefully. "He's been very generous." Just remember, you worked hard for this. You earned it. Emily smiled, but inside she wondered if that was true. Had she earned this, or had she simply been in the right place at the right time, sending an email to the wrong person? Was she skilled or just lucky? And what would happen when her luck ran out? 3 days before Christmas, Vincent called Emily into his office for a private meeting. She'd learned to read his moods by now, and today he seemed unusually serious. "I have something to tell you," he began. "Something you need to know before we go any further in our working relationship." Emily sat down, tension building in her chest. "The organization I mentioned, the one that's been testing boundaries? They've made contact with someone in my circle, trying to gather information, find weaknesses. This happened before. It'll happen again. But this time they asked specifically about you." Emily's blood went cold. What did they want to know? Your background, your relationship to me, whether you might be vulnerable to recruitment. Vincent's expression was hard. "I'm telling you this because I need you to understand the stakes. These aren't casual competitors. They're serious people who play for serious stakes." What do they want? What everyone wants. Power, territory, leverage. They think they can use you to get to me either by recruiting you or by threatening you. Neither is going to happen, but you need to be alert. Emily stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city far below. "Vincent, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." "All right, what is it? What exactly do you do?" "I know the official version, import, export, real estate, investments, but what's underneath that? What am I actually a part of?" Vincent was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured. "I facilitate transactions that can't happen through conventional channels. I connect people who need things with people who can provide them. I manage information, relationships, and influence in ways that exist outside traditional business structures." That's still vague. It has to be. The moment I give you specific information, you become liable for that knowledge. Right now, you can honestly say you don't know details of certain operations. That's protection for you, Emily. The less you know about certain aspects of my business, the safer you are if questions are ever asked. Questions by whom? Law enforcement, by anyone. My competitors, authorities, even people in my own organization who might have divided loyalties. Vincent stood and moved closer to her. "I brought you in because you were outside this world. That outsider status is valuable. Don't trade it for knowledge that could compromise you." Emily turned to face him. "But I'm not outside anymore, am I? I'm living in a luxury apartment you're paying for. I'm earning more money than I ever imagined. People are watching me because of my association with you. I crossed over weeks ago. There are degrees of involvement. You're involved, yes, but you're not implicated. That's an important distinction. And if that changes, if at some point I need you to choose sides, make decisions that have serious consequences." Vincent met her eyes steadily. "Then I trust you to make the right choice. That's why I hired you, Emily. Not just because you're competent, but because you have integrity. Even if that integrity someday works against me, I'd rather have someone like you close than someone who can be bought or intimidated." It was the most honest conversation they'd had. Emily felt the weight of it, the trust implicit in Vincent's words. "I'm not going anywhere," she said finally. "Whatever's coming, whatever complications arise, I'm in this. But I need you to promise me something." "What's that?" "No more surprises. If there's danger, I want to know. If decisions affect me, I want to be consulted. I can handle truth better than I can handle being protected from it." Vincent considered this, then nodded. "Agreed. Full transparency within the bounds of what's safe for you to know. You're not just an employee anymore." "Not anymore, Emily. You're a key player in this operation now, and you absolutely deserve to be treated like one of us." Christmas Eve arrived cloaked in a thick blanket of snow. Emily's mother had returned to Wisconsin, bursting with pride over her daughter's achievements, though she seemed only mildly concerned by the somewhat vague explanation of Emily's line of work. Emily found herself spending the evening alone in her apartment, watching the city slowly vanish under a pristine white layer, contemplating the dramatic and almost unbelievable turn her life had taken. Suddenly, her phone buzzed to life. It was Vincent's number. "Merry Christmas, Emily. Merry Christmas. I figured you'd be with your family." "I am. Marco and Sophia are here with me. We're just about to sit down for dinner, and we realized you were likely spending the evening alone. We'd love for you to come join us. David will be there to pick you up in about 20 minutes. "Vincent, I really don't want to intrude." "You're not intruding at all. Your family now, Emily. That's just how things work around here." 20 minutes. And with that, the line went dead. Emily caught a glimpse of her reflection in the dark window pane. A woman dressed in comfortable clothes, all alone on Christmas Eve in a luxurious apartment. Then, a smile slowly spread across her face as she turned and went to get ready. David drove her to a beautiful brownstone in Lincoln Park, a stunning historic building that Emily had no idea Vincent even owned. Stepping inside, she was met with a warm and surprisingly normal atmosphere. Marco was busy cooking in the kitchen. Apparently, he was quite the excellent chef. Sophia was setting the table, dressed casually for a change. Vincent was opening a bottle of wine, looking more relaxed than Emily had ever seen him. "Welcome," he said, handing her a glass. "To new family." They all raised their glasses in a toast, and Emily felt a sense of peace and belonging settle deep within her. These people, this strange, complicated, sometimes dangerous circle had somehow become her world. Whatever moral complexities existed, whatever hidden risks lurked just beneath the surface, this was undeniably where she belonged now. Dinner was loud and lively, filled with fascinating stories about Chicago, tales of growing up on the South Side, and anecdotes about business deals that had either gone exceptionally well or disasters that had been narrowly averted. Marco shared some particularly embarrassing stories about a young Vincent. Sophia recounted her journey from law school to becoming Vincent's trusted attorney. Emily contributed her own stories, reminiscing about her time at the diner, her personal struggles, and of course, the moment she'd sent that fateful email. "Best typo you ever made," Marco said, raising his glass in a toast. "Best typo I ever received," Vincent added with a smile. As the evening progressed and the snow continued to fall softly outside, Emily realized that she was genuinely happy. Genuinely, completely happy. The complications and potential risks were real, no doubt about that. But so was this feeling of belonging, the sense of community, and the profound sense of purpose she now felt. Around midnight, she found herself standing by the window with Vincent, silently watching the snow-covered city. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything, for taking a chance on me. Thank you for saying yes and for trusting me enough to welcome me into this world." Vincent paused for a moment. "Whatever comes next, Emily, and things will definitely get complicated. Remember tonight. Remember that at the core of all this business and strategy and careful maneuvering, there are real people who genuinely care about each other. That matters more than anything else." Emily nodded slowly, understanding the deeper meaning behind his words. Loyalty wasn't just about business. It was about the people you chose to stand with when things inevitably became difficult. And she'd already made her choice. Outside, Chicago slept soundly beneath its thick blanket of snow, beautiful and brutal and full of secrets. Emily Carter, former waitress, now a trusted member of Vincent Marino's inner circle, watched over it all with newly awakened eyes. She'd crossed a line that she couldn't uncross, entered a world she couldn't simply leave behind. But standing here, surrounded by people who'd become her chosen family, she found that she had absolutely no regrets. The price of loyalty, she was beginning to learn, wasn't always paid in compromises. Sometimes it was paid in unwavering commitment, in choosing to stand with your people even when the path ahead was uncertain and unclear. And Emily was discovering that she possessed far more strength for that challenging journey than she'd ever imagined. The new year was rapidly approaching, and with it, challenges she couldn't yet begin to fathom. But tonight, on this very special Christmas Eve, in a warm, inviting house filled with people who'd become her family, Emily Carter allowed herself to simply be present, to be grateful for everything she had, to be truly home. Whatever tomorrow might bring, she knew she'd face it head-on, not alone, but surrounded by the complicated, dangerous, fiercely loyal family she'd found in the most unexpected way. The snow continued to fall steadily, covering everything in a thick layer of white, making the world seem fresh and brand new. And inside, the warmth and camaraderie continued to flourish. Laughter and stories filled the air, strengthening the bonds that form between people who choose to trust each other in a world that often gives them every reason not to. This was her life now, and despite everything, Emily wouldn't change a single thing. January arrived with a bitter cold and the consequences Emily had been warned about. She was leaving the office late one Thursday evening, completely exhausted from analyzing a particularly complex property deal, when a man approached her in the parking garage. He was well-dressed, professional in appearance, and completely unthreatening, which was precisely what made Emily's instincts flare with warning. "Miss Carter, could I have a moment of your time?" Emily's hand instinctively moved toward her phone, ready to call Tony, who was waiting in the SUV just 30 feet away. "I don't believe we've met." "We haven't. My name is Agent Ross, FBI. He flashed his credentials quickly, almost too quickly to read, but she definitely caught the sight of the badge. "I'd like to talk to you about your employer, Vincent Marino." Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but she maintained a neutral expression, remembering Marco's valuable advice. "Say absolutely nothing without an attorney present. I don't discuss my work with anyone. If you have any questions regarding Marino Enterprises, I suggest you contact our legal department." "Ms. Carter, you're not in any trouble. However, we believe that Vincent Marino is involved in activities that you might not be fully aware of. We'd like to offer you protection and possibly immunity in exchange for your cooperation." The word immunity hung in the frigid air. Emily understood immediately what they were asking of her. They were asking her to betray Vincent, to provide information that would ultimately be used against him. "I have nothing to say to you. Please do not approach me again without an attorney present." She walked past him toward the SUV, her legs shaking slightly but her stride remaining steady and confident. Tony was already out of the vehicle before she even reached it, his expression hard and assessing as he took in the man in the parking garage. "Everything all right, Miss Carter? Fine. Let's go." As they drove away, Emily noticed Agent Ross watching them, his expression unreadable. She waited until they were several blocks away before speaking. "That man said he was with the FBI. He wanted information about Vincent." Tony's jaw tightened visibly. "Mr. Marino needs to be informed about this immediately." 20 minutes later, Emily found herself sitting in Vincent's office with Marco and Sophia present. She recounted the entire encounter, word for word, while Sophia meticulously took notes. "You did exactly the right thing," Vincent said when she finished. "You engaged minimally, refused to answer any questions, and immediately removed yourself from the situation." "But they approached me, Vincent. Federal agents are investigating you, and now they know that I'm close enough to you to be considered valuable." Sophia spoke, her sharp legal mind already working. "This is a fishing expedition." They approached Emily in a semi-public space, quickly identified themselves, and made vague offers. "They're testing the waters to see if she'll take the bait, if she's vulnerable to recruitment." "And if I'm not?" Emily asked. Marco answered. "Then they might start applying pressure. Nothing overtly illegal, of course. They won't threaten you directly, but they'll make it known that cooperation is available if you want it. They'll subtly suggest that Vincent is using you, that you're in danger, that loyalty is foolish when you could easily have immunity." Emily felt the walls closing in around her. Just 6 short weeks ago, her biggest problem was an abusive boss at a local diner. Now, federal agents were attempting to recruit her as an informant against a man who'd become something between an employer and a member of her own family. "What do I do?" she asked quietly. Vincent stood and walked over to the window, turning his back to them. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "You do what's right for you, Emily. If you want to cooperate with them, if you want immunity and protection, I completely understand. I won't hold it against you, Emily." He turned to face her, his gaze steady. "I'm serious. You didn't sign up for federal investigations. You accidentally sent a resignation email to the wrong address, and I pulled you into a world you didn't choose. If you want out, this is your chance. Clean exit, no complications. Emily stood up abruptly, feeling anger rising within her. Do you really think I'd do that after everything? I think you'd be smart to consider it. They're not wrong, Emily. I have operated in gray areas. There are aspects of my business that definitely cross the line. You could testify truthfully about things you've observed and walk away from all of this. And betray you in the process. It wouldn't be betrayal. It would be self-preservation. Emily moved closer to him, her voice intense. 6 weeks ago I was drowning. You gave me an opportunity when I had absolutely nothing. You paid me fairly, treated me with respect, and welcomed me into your circle. Marco and Sophia and Tony, they've become my family. You've become my family. And you honestly think that I'd trade all of that for immunity from crimes I haven't even committed? Vincent's expression softened slightly. I'm simply giving you a choice. That's all. Then here's my choice. I'm not talking to the FBI. I'm not providing any information. I'm staying right here, doing my job, standing with the people who stood with me when I needed them most. Emily paused, her expression unwavering. But I need to know, are you in serious danger? Is this investigation something that could actually hurt you? Sophia answered. Federal investigations are always serious. But Vincent has always been careful. Legitimate businesses, proper documentation, layers of protection. They're looking, but we've made sure that there's nothing definitive for them to find. Then we handle it, Emily said firmly. Together. Marco smiled slightly, the first time Emily had seen genuine warmth from him. I told you she'd be solid. The next 2 weeks were filled with tension. Emily varied her routes, remained constantly alert, and immediately reported any unusual approaches. Agent Ross reappeared twice more, once outside her apartment building and once at a coffee shop near the office. Each time, Emily refused to engage in any conversation and contacted Sophia immediately. They're persistent, Sophia noted after the third encounter. But they're not escalating. That's actually good news. It means they don't have enough evidence to compel testimony. Meanwhile, Emily's work continued as usual. She analyzed deals, managed schedules, and coordinated meetings. Her competence had become absolutely indispensable to Vincent's operations, and he relied on her judgment increasingly. In late January, during a private meeting, Vincent told her something that changed everything. I'm transitioning the business, he said quietly. I'm moving away from the gray areas, focusing exclusively on legitimate operations, real estate, investments, consulting. It's going to take 2 years, maybe 3, but I'm done operating in the shadows. Emily stared at him, surprised. Why? Because I'm tired. Because the risks just aren't worth the rewards anymore. Because I want to build something that can exist in the daylight. He paused for a moment. And because you reminded me that there's value in integrity. You walked away from a bad situation on principle. Maybe it's time I did the same. Vincent, you don't have to do this for me. I'm not. I'm doing it for myself. You just helped me remember who I wanted to be before circumstances made me someone else. Spring arrived slowly, Chicago thawing reluctantly. By April, the FBI had stopped approaching Emily. Sophia's aggressive legal responses had apparently convinced them that she simply wasn't going to cooperate. Vincent's transition was well underway. Several questionable business relationships had been quietly terminated. Legitimate enterprises were being expanded. Marco had taken on a more formal role as head of corporate security. Sophia was restructuring contracts and partnerships to ensure that everything was completely above board. One morning, Emily received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read simply, "Job opportunity." She opened it cautiously. It was from Jerry Collins. "Emily, I heard you're doing well. Good for you. Rosie's Diner closed last month. I just couldn't keep it going. I'm working at a chain restaurant now, and it's taught me a lot about how badly I managed my own place. I owe you an apology. You were a good employee, and I treated you terribly. I was threatened by your competence and took it out on you instead of actually learning from you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you were right to quit. And I hope that wherever you are now, You're being treated with the respect you deserved from me. Jerry Collins. Emily read it twice, feeling something release deep inside her. She'd carried anger toward Jerry for years, but now it felt distant and unimportant. He was just a scared man who'd wielded the little power he had badly. She'd moved so far beyond that world that it barely touched her now. She didn't respond to the email. Some chapters simply closed without needing any final words. 6 months after that first fateful email mishap, Emily sat in Vincent's office, reviewing quarterly financials. The numbers told a powerful story of transformation, declining revenue from questionable sources and steadily increasing income from legitimate businesses. The transition was definitely working. We're going to make it, Vincent said, studying the same numbers. 2 years from now, Marino Enterprises will be completely clean. I'll be just another Chicago businessman with real estate holdings and investment portfolios. Will you miss it? Emily asked. The excitement, the edge? Vincent smiled knowingly. I'm 42, Emily. I've had enough excitement for one lifetime. Now I want stability, legacy, something I can actually be proud of without any qualifications. You should be proud. You're choosing the harder path. We're choosing it. None of this happens without you. Your integrity reminded me of my own. Your courage in standing with me when you could have easily walked away. That mattered more than you know. Emily stood and walked over to the window, looking out at the city she'd struggled in, suffered in, and finally found her place in. I sent that email to the wrong address on one of the worst days of my life, and it turned into the best mistake I ever made. Not a mistake, Vincent said quietly. A beginning. Epilogue. 2 years later, the conference room buzzed with energy and excitement. Emily stood at the head of the table, presenting to a room full of investors. She'd been promoted to Director of Business Development, overseeing Marino Enterprises' expansion into new markets. Her presentation was sharp, professional, and confident. Vincent watched from the back of the room, pride evident in his expression. Marco stood beside him, now officially Chief of Corporate Security, complete with business cards and everything. Sophia had become General Counsel, managing an entire legal team. After the presentation, after all the handshakes and congratulations, Emily found herself alone with Vincent in his office. Remember when I couldn't even afford rent? She said, laughing. I remember a woman who wrote the most brutally honest resignation email I'd ever read, who took a chance on a mysterious offer from a complete stranger, and who stood by her principles when it would have been so much easier to walk away. I remember being terrified of you. And now you're my family, the complicated, sometimes frustrating, ultimately loyal family I chose. Vincent smiled warmly. The waitress who quit via email. The mafia boss who hired her. They both laughed. Vincent had never actually confirmed or denied that label. And Emily had learned that it didn't really matter. What mattered was who they'd become, who they were actively choosing to be. Her phone buzzed. A text message from her mother. So proud of you, sweetheart. My daughter, the business executive. Emily smiled. Her mother didn't know the full story, and probably never would. But she knew that her daughter was successful, happy, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her. And that was definitely enough. Outside, Chicago gleamed in the summer sunlight. The city that had almost broken Emily now felt like home. Not because it had become any gentler, but because she'd become so much stronger. Not because the risks had disappeared entirely, but because she'd learned that she was brave enough to face them. That wrong email address had led her here, to a corner office in a building she'd once entered nervously, to a family she'd found in the most unexpected place, and to a version of herself she hadn't even known existed. Sometimes the changes we fear the most are actually the ones that set us free. Emily had learned that truth the hard way, through federal investigations and dangerous complications and late-night decisions that could have destroyed absolutely everything. But she'd also learned that loyalty, real loyalty, wasn't about blind obedience. It was about actively choosing to stand with people who'd earned your trust, even when easier paths presented themselves. It was about growing together, changing together, and becoming better together. Vincent Marino had given her an opportunity when she'd needed it most. And in return, Emily Carter had reminded him of who he truly wanted to be. They'd saved each other in their own complicated and unexpected way. And now, 2 years after that fateful email, they stood in an office overlooking Chicago, two people who'd found redemption in each other's unwavering integrity. "Thank you," Emily said quietly. "For what?" "For replying. For seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself. For giving me the chance to become this person." Vincent's expression was warm and sincere. "Thank you for taking that chance, for trusting me when you had every single reason not to, for reminding me that it's never too late to choose integrity over convenience." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city that had witnessed their remarkable transformation. Chicago, with all of its inherent complexity and contradiction, had served as the perfect backdrop for their unlikely story. A story that started with a simple typo and became something that neither of them could have ever predicted. The waitress had become a powerful executive. The mafia boss had become a legitimate businessman. And together, they'd built something truly worth having. A life defined not by where they'd started, but by who they'd ultimately chosen to become. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, a constant hum of activity. And inside, two people who'd found each other through the most unlikely circumstance stood together, looking toward a future they'd created through courage, loyalty, and the unwavering belief that change, real and lasting change, was always entirely possible. Sometimes Emily truly believed that the wrong address leads you exactly where you need to be.